Holy fuck. Back in 2013, Naughty Dog Studios released The Last of Us, blurring the lines between big-budget Hollywood movies and interactive video games in an emotionally destructive narrative that rewrote the rulebook on how we could feel after finishing a video game. 7 years later, amidst a sea of controversy, delays, leaks and even butthurt review bombing. Hold up, I refuse to call it controversy. Having a gay female protagonist in your game in the year 2020, it means nothing, it's fine. Get over it. Anyone complaining or saying that Naughty Dog has an agenda by doing this simply has their own bigoted agenda and need to get in the fucking sea. Fuck those people. If you can't handle having a female protagonist in a game in the year 2020, you're living in the wrong era. Tomb Raider already did this in the 90s. Fucking get over it. That's the last I'll say about it. On with the review. Have Naughty Dog managed to live up to the expectations of the bar they set so high? Find out today as I review The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us 2 picks up Ellie and Joel's story 5 years after his fated lie saved her life but damned the world. Society has begun to slowly piece itself back together in the years since Outbreak Day, with small towns and settlements popping up and communities beginning to thrive despite the still very active threat of the cordyceps virus. However, with these growing and branching societies in this post-apocalyptic world, it's only natural that this spawns new conflicts, and Last of Us 2 starts to weave its own tale that I absolutely will not spoil here. Although I won't talk about any of the story, I can talk about how effectively the game goes about presenting it. There simply has never before been a marriage of the quality of an actor's performance and the ability of the technology to convey it, through motion capture and animation, in any medium. Every single member of the cast is brought to life in an absolute masterclass of acting, writing and storytelling. Ellie and Dina's heartfelt relationship is masterfully woven into an otherwise unforgiving and violent world. Naughty Dog have created a game that will leave you feeling completely emotionally drained, covering themes of hatred, revenge, jealousy and bigotry in a way that very few storytellers could ever achieve. Relationships are nuanced, motivations are extremely well thought out, and the conflicting emotions you will experience will have you fighting back the tears several times before the credits roll. Quite simply put, it has to be experienced to be believed. As a survival horror game, item scavenging, inventory management, and crafting makes a welcome return. The survivalist nature of the world encourages scouring your environment for much needed supplies. You may find ammo or melee weapons ready for use, but other items can be crafted how you like. Rags and alcohol combine into explosives or medical supplies, supplements can be used to increase your innate abilities like steady aim or stealth, and scrap parts can be used to upgrade your weapons at one of the game's many workbenches. There's a bit of a Walking Dead vibe going on with all of the scavenging, except unlike The Walking Dead, it's not absolute hot garbage. Traversal and exploration takes a bit more of a starring role throughout. In terms of actual environmental size, Last of Us 2 is far and away Naughty Dog's largest game geographically. Although still very much a linear experience with a correct path to take, you are occasionally left to explore much larger areas than we're used to from the developer. Exploration is always rewarding though, as rummaging through drawers, lockers, combination safes and more will lead you to more vital ammo or crafting supplies. More so than just practical rewards, however, you will often find handwritten letters accounting bleak tales of struggle and woe from the survivors that came before you. There are also clues to find for the locations of supplies or the codes to locks, and some other Easter eggs I won't spoil. More so than any of that though, the environments are among the best I have ever seen in a game, so exploration was its own reward regardless. Encounters in The Last of Us 2 play out mostly similar to the first game, but much more violent and visceral. The infected return, but with a few new gruesome forms of the virus, and new militarized or fanatical factions who can overwhelm you with force or use sniffer dogs to track you. And don't worry, for all you animal lovers out there, they have said that you can finish the entirety of the game without killing any dogs, but
Dogs? Man, dogs. I'll drown a dog in a bucket right now. Give me a dog.
Each time you happen upon a group of infected or a rival faction, you'll have a number of options at your disposal. If you decide to take the enemy head on, you'll do so running and gunning from cover, or trying not to get flanked by the game's new and improved AI. Enemies will work together to weed you out, so you can't stick behind a particular cover for too long without being seen. And choosing your weapon carefully is essential. The rifle is accurate and powerful at range, but slow to reload. The pistol is rapid fire and good for picking out headshots, and the shotgun is good for blowing off limbs and slowing down any pursuing infected. Molotov cocktails, trap mines and smoke bombs, among others, make sure you always have an effective option for the job. Each gunshot, whether you deal it out or receive it, feels extremely violent and is accompanied by an outstanding combat audio design. Bullets whiz by before audibly tearing into flesh, and arrowheads rattle through bone with a satisfying but disturbing crunch. Given that this is a Naughty Dog game, purveyors of the Uncharted series, there are quite a few on-rails action set pieces that would give any Hollywood action movie a run for their money, but are spaced out well enough not to take away from the survival horror. Although the difficulty is quite forgiving, resources are limited and the odds are usually stacked heavily against you. You may decide that taking a stealthy approach is the better and more effective route, most often than not, utilising the game's listening mechanic to get the jump on or completely avoid enemy combatants. Slow movement will generally get you through most encounters if you plan your path appropriately, avoiding enemies, but you can lift the tension to a maximum high by going prone and crawling through short grass right through most enemies' lines of sight if you're careful. Sneaking through an enemy faction's base camp or avoiding the echolocation of a horde of clickers without being seen or heard is some of the most rewarding and tense stealth sections since we last played a Metal Gear game. Enemies can be avoided entirely via stealth in most situations, but Ellie comes equipped with a knife to dispatch enemies quietly from stealth to even the odds and open up a path. Bricks and bottles return from the previous game, which can be thrown to stun enemies and cause a distraction or lead a horde of clickers towards an unaware group. Strategic use can see you securing a safe getaway among the ensuing carnage. Many games purport that you can play them how you want. Usually it's a thin veneer of choice, with a more obvious way that the player is intended to play it by the creator. No matter what you choose to do in The Last of Us 2, it feels like what you were supposed to do. If you choose to run away, the chase sequence is thrilling and cinematic. If you fight, the combat is brutal, and if you stealth, the relief at the end is incomparable. Naughty Dog have been criticised in the past about the protagonist of their games killing literally hundreds of people throughout without so much as a second thought about it. With The Last of Us 2, it feels like Naughty Dog have taken this criticism on board. There is a real weight and even a guilt with every human enemy you dispatch. Hearing their comrades' anguish-riddled screams as they call the name of the person you've just killed ensures that Naughty Dog are well aware of the choices their characters are making. The level of detail that they have included in the stealth kill animation ensures that you will rarely feel good about it. From watching the light fade out of their eyes as they die, or hearing the grotesque gargling of their last breath as their blood stains the ground, killing is not something Last of Us takes lightly. Another Naughty Dog staple is the off-the-cuff dialogue between characters during puzzling and exploration. Relationships are strengthened with jokes or songs as you boost each other up to the next ladder or hold open a gate. The dialogue always feels natural for the moment and is a welcome accompaniment to some of the game's longer explorative sections. However, one of the only real technical flaws I experienced throughout my time with the game came in the form of this dialogue, beginning when characters were further apart from each other than the creator intended, and I would only hear one side of the conversation, or sometimes the conversation would cut out entirely if you happened to accidentally trigger the next scene. AI companion characters do seem to fare better than in the original game, pointing out enemies to you or providing combat backup, enough so that in some of the solo sections in the game, you will miss having someone watching your back. However, I do think this feature was a little bit underutilized, as occasionally they will be extremely effective helping you stealth kill enemies, but other times they will just sneak around behind you, not knowing what to do. Pushing the PS4 right to what has to be its very limits, this is easily one of the best looking games I have ever played. From sprawling vistas, right down to the micro detail of every environment and collectible, The Last of Us 2 is a fitting swan song for the PlayStation 4 before we move into the next generation of consoles. Every item in the game is modelled to absolute perfection and the attention to detail is astounding. Whether it's the accurately fingered guitar chords, or the micro expressions on characters' faces and eyes telling us exactly what they're thinking without them having to express it in words, The Last of Us 2 has set a new standard for presentation. A naive movie director named Steven Spielberg once stated that video games can be considered art when somebody confesses that they cried at level 17. Well, I think we've long since passed level 17, and I would say that not only are video games art, but they have long surpassed the movie medium in terms of emotional investment and impact. The active experience of playing a game in comparison to the passive experience of watching a movie, it's just not in the same ballpark anymore. The Last of Us 2 is not, as some people say, as good as a movie, it's much, much better. I score The Last of Us 2 9.5 out of 10. A modern masterpiece that stretches both the limitations of the PS4 and of emotive storytelling in video games, painting a vast and bleak world full of horror, guilt, and regret. And on that very light-hearted note, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Please do check out some of my other reviews. I also make music videos, top 10s, and other things on the channel. Please subscribe for more like that in the future. Don't post any fucking spoilers, and stay safe.